Thank you, Raj. And there has been a very close connect of your organization, per se Tata Group, with the kind of research and education that they have been doing. You know, the foundation of Indian Institute of Science or the TIFR or multiple medical institutions or the Tata Institute of Social Sciences, you know, they've been very closely into this area and they've been partnering. So I'll turn to you later to ask a question to learn a little more about the best practices. Yeah, please.
Before we close these opening remarks, in a way, I wanted to just add one more perspective so that perhaps, more meaningful this session would become, is that as we do this, more than discussion, I would request each one of you to ask a question. Are you that bridge? How strong a bridge are you? And at the end of this session, let us all resolve that we would, each one of us, be a stronger bridge than what we have been. Then the discussion would be even more meaningful. Each thing that we are saying, if you are in industry, are you ready to move towards academia? Every day, do something. If you are in academia, are you ready to now collaborate more with industry? That's how perhaps what we have not been able to do in 40 years, we would be able to do a lot more in coming 40 minutes. Let's work towards it.
I think you raise a very, very important point, because I think there's one thing we need to accept. At least this is what my experience is. Now, don't beat me up for this, okay? I think the way folks work in industry, in the business, are wired versus the folks who go into academia are wired very different, right? Now, because we are wired differently, it sometimes makes the collaboration that much more, perhaps extra, this thing. It's something I feel. I'm getting some dirty looks from some corners, I know, but it's maybe a little controversial to say this. But sometimes, accepting it and saying, hey, we are wired differently. Let's respect our differences and work towards how can we get a far better product going. I think will get us a far better thing to do. Yeah? So I really endorse what you're saying.
Thank you, Raj. I think Rajeshwari has a comment to make, so we'd be happy to listen.
Well, I think in India we believe in two goddesses. One is Lakshmi, who is the goddess of wealth, and another is Saraswati, who is the goddess of learning and knowledge. And it is believed that Saraswati and Lakshmi do not sit together at any place. So what happens, the academics, they are at the receiving end, being a knowledge gainer, and the industry is full of finances, where so what happens, one is at the giving end and another is at the receiving end. So it becomes sometimes a very complex relationship. That is one aspect which I wanted to bring. But I'm very happy to share here, the Academy of Human Resource Development in India started with this thought to bridge this gap. And that is where we have done many interventions into the industry, went there, researched the problems, have come out with wonderful creative solutions, and also have designed and developed the organizational transformation through various efforts which were very highly research based. So they had a very concrete, a foundation. So that is where I think it's very important that AHRD in India has been doing it for last 27 years. We have not beaten that drum into the market that we are doing it, but I think it's time now to say that we are doing it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I think, Rajeshwari, I completely agree with you. We don't have to beat the drum, but we must let the world know what's happening, because the world is much larger and there is a huge need. The kind of work that AHRD has been doing, particularly under your leadership, we are all aware of that. But I think larger industry is still not aware of these opportunities that we have. We should do that. So with that now, I'll turn to the question round, and may I start with you, Nayan Bhai? You've been a consultant, and you've been working with the government agencies, the private sector, corporate, and all sorts of things. What, in your experience, is this gap that we are talking about in terms of the demand for talent and supply for the talent? The readiness of the talent that is coming out of the schools of different kinds versus the employability that the industry looks at there. What has been your experience on that?
The gap is huge, and as he says, I have had the privilege of working as advisor to two chief ministers in Madhya Pradesh and Chhattisgarh, and I was chairman of Textiles Committee of Government of India, which had the role of taking textiles of India globally. So in that capacities, I think I saw it in the government as a consultant and advisor to many corporate groups and part of CII, Gujarat Chamber. I also know what industry is going through. And I think the government and the industry are both seeking graduates who they don't get, not from the educational institutes. I think as a consultancy firm, whenever we seek graduates, we don't get the graduates that really are the ones that could be put to use immediately. Which means that I think any graduate that you take, you keep in mind that for a year or so, you would actually pay them, train them, ready them. In terms of basic skills, at times they are lacking. So I think, as I tell everybody, I tell myself that more than this conference, I ask myself, am I that bridge? And if I am that bridge, how strong I am? And how much I have done. So as again part of a few universities and on the board on the administrative side, on teaching, because I enjoy, I think some of the best moments of my life are in the classroom. And I think every time that I go to a class at IIMA, because I have written cases based on my experiences, when they are taught, I go there, and I think it's very, very exhilarating to interact with young minds who would question you as to how what you did was the best thing to do or not. And when you have classroom luxury, you come up with 15 solutions which were better than what I actually did. So I think we could make the beginning by discussing all this, but are we, if we are in industry, ready to go to classrooms more, to actually teach? That would make a difference. If we are in the government, are we ready to actually be part of educational institutes and go and contribute there? In IIM Ahmedabad, we have board members who are from the government. In our Ganpat University, we have members who are ex officio, secretary education. I think if you see the minutes of the meeting, most of the times the board members who are having frequent leave of absence are the government officers, because they have some other priorities. I'm saying that if there is any government officer here, is he ready to say that, okay, from now on, I won't miss a board meeting unless I have to? In fact, in IIM Ahmedabad, we had some names and short list of board of for directorship, which went through the board of governors, but it had some administrative issues because the government representative was not present in that board meetings. So I'm saying that if we are in the government, are we ready to do that? If we are in industry, are we ready to go more to the classroom? I'm also part of some of the universities where I talk about curriculum and kind of we revise curriculum to suit what is required. If we are in educational institutes, and I think we have many who are here, are we ready to go more towards industry? Are we ready to do more joint projects with the industry where we actually work on something? I think most of the times in India, research is done by industries themselves, unlike the US, where perhaps they go to a good university for the research that they want, which means that I don't know about my friend from Titan as to if they want to know the trends of the youth as to what they would consume. Would they be confident to go to an educational institute and do a joint exercise, or would they like to do it themselves? I have seen most of my friends from industry who would be compelled either by their belief or by the reality, that they would feel that their finding would be the best if they do it themselves, which means that they don't find educational institutes sensitive to what they want to find out, to actually trust them to churn out a research report which would actually help them design for the future, for the youth that they are trying to target. So how do we build this? So if you are in industry, how do you take a chance, say with he taking a chance with a local university, knowing that he might have to walk an extra mile, knowing that he might not get exactly 100%, but that is how a beginning is made. I think at the end of this, if each one of us at least resolves that I would now be a stronger bridge, like I would say that I'm going to classroom maybe 15 times in a year, but now I resolve that I'll go 20 times a year. I would attend and not miss any board meeting in the university, I think, and same for academia. The moment that happens, I think we would have made a small but very significant beginning. And of course, she would submit a report which is for the use of the government. But I think if we start walking, then the bridge would happen.
And I can't agree more with you, Nayanbhai. You know, just a few years back, I used to work for Adani, and I was in Ahmedabad, and there is this UPES in Ahmedabad, and there was one government officer who was in charge, principal secretary of government of Gujarat. And this person, he kept on following up. And one day he came to our office, he took me and my CEO to the campus. He said, just come and have lunch with us. He took us around the campus, he offered lunch to us, and then he brought a few students there and he said, why don't you have a chat with them, 15, 20 students. That relationship built, and we became a company on that campus from that year onwards. We started recruiting from that school. It makes a huge difference for any authority like that to take that kind of initiative. So thank you so much for sharing that. Raj, I would like to ask you, from your organization point, like we are talking about talent readiness. So what do you look at when you go to the schools or you go to the finishing schools and asking for talent, maybe the engineering or management talent? What is the Tata Group or Titan's requirement in terms of readiness of people, and what would be typical selection criteria that you will use while selecting people there?
I'm normally a little wary about talking about this in an academic institution, but I think fair enough. Good. Okay. I think when I look at, we recruit students from management schools as management trainees. We go to extensively recruit from engineering colleges, and we also recruit from design schools. So there's a fair bit of the intake in all three. Plus we have a graduate program which is there. One thing which has changed in the last few years is that we don't recruit just after an interview and a group discussion, whatever, at the final thing. We prefer to engage with the students before. So how does that work? Simple, we recruit people at summer with the intent of taking the best of that lot on our roles at the end of 1 year. So typically we take about 50 plus, I'm just giving you a broad number, 50 plus summer trainees. And the interviewing at the summer trainee program is fairly intensive, right? And they engage with us for 8 to 10 weeks. We give them real live projects, and we take summer training very seriously. That's something which has changed. Earlier, summer training would be like you take students and they go for a project, and it's a bit of a chore, right? But for us, it's we turned the table on that one, and we said, let's take these summer projects very seriously, and the mentors. And each manager actually becomes a mentor come buddy for the summer trainee, right? And the other way around. Each summer trainee has a mentor come buddy who's not their project guide, right? And out of the 50, at the end of the summer training process, when they have to actually make a presentation on the what they've done. That's a very detailed one as well. And we recruit about 20 odd from that, depending, 20 if we find, right? For example, the last year we took a batch of 23 management trainees. 19 of them came through the PPO route. Only 4, and that too in HR, because we didn't find anybody in HR who did the summer training suitable enough at that time. We went back to campuses to recruit. And there again, we put them through a fairly intensive recruitment drive. Coming to what we look for, I think one, which is the very thing, is that we look for a person's intellectual, academic capability, understanding of the subject knowledge, but not so much from a theoretical perspective. How do they apply it? And when we look for people from the summer training perspective, we also get the opportunity to understand their ability to learn. Because one of the key competencies that we have for our leaders is being innately curious, right? Because ultimately, that's something which we put a premium on. Because the rest of it, I mean, none of us is perfect. Everybody is, but you have to have the ability to learn and change, right? I think that's important. From our industry perspective, because of the business that we are in, aesthetics is very critical. And having an aesthetic sense is very critical. You don't have to be a designer, but then you need to have an aesthetic sense. So this is something we changed over the last couple of years. We said we started looking more for that, you know. And over the last 3-4 years, I think we put a premium on this and said, how can we assess people for that? So we, of course, have a set of tools we use to assess. We don't rely just on an interview, and we try and see how much of application that they can do. And because of the fact that most people that we recruit as management trainees, or even as graduate engineer trainees, would become people managers and hopefully leaders over a period of time, I think the ability to respect differences on the one hand, but at the same time being able to work with people, you know, and work with very diverse set of people, I think is very important. So because we find that because we engage with this long-term thing, or 2 months, for example, with management trainees, 2.5 months, or with graduate engineer trainees, we have a 12-week program. In our designers, we have designers who pass through NID or NIFT, especially in jewelry and watches design, who do 6 months with us as interns. And they are then recruited basis their capability, right? So that engagement, I think, gives us a very, very good understanding of the individual. It added to that, what we've seen, and touch wood, and I hope it stays that way, is if we've given 10 PPOs, we've had 10 people accepting it. Now that tells you a story, because if ultimately it takes 2 to tango. As much as an organization has to recruit a youngster, I think an organization also has to project itself and give the youngster a good environment so that the youngster is engaged enough to do their best, right? So I think the summer training program or the internship program, when we take that seriously and we give people projects which are meaty and they get to understand the culture and they realize that, hey, listen, this is an environment I'd like to work in. Then it's not money alone that really makes people come and join a company, in my view. Right? We're not the best of paymasters, by the way, but we give a decent environment. And I think a lot of people look for that, right? Money is important, you've got to be hygienically good, but beyond that, I mean, I think it's important to give that right environment and the right kind of opportunity. People look for challenges. So when they realize that, hey, even in my 2 months, I'm challenged, and I'm given something real life, they say, hey, possibility is that when they've interacted with people, they get a good view of the organization. So the decision to join a company is a considered view. So I think that is important as well, right? So I don't know if I've answered your question,
I
but
think
yeah.
you have very well answered. Thank you, Raj. And I think Shailendra has a comment to make on that.
So one of the reasons, and if I may build on what all the people have said so far, there's a fundamental disconnect often between academia and industry for the following reason. Academia solves puzzles, right? Puzzles are problems that people give to each other. Academia has a lot of that flavor. Whereas industry solves problems. Problems are those that environments or nature gives to us, right? Now, of course, academia also solves problems, especially if you're in the natural sciences and you run a lot of lab experiments, but often that is mediated through what people consider to be interesting at that point. Whereas industry focuses on what is painful. Where is my pain? Where is the pain point? I need a painkiller right away. So the ability to add value in terms of solving pain points is the key orientation that students need to have, and academics for that matter. And by the way, I didn't have it. I learned it the hard way by running a company, while teaching full-time, namely a startup. That's when I really learned that a startup can only be in business if it actually solves somebody's pain point, if it actually solves a problem. Our problem was that we were in love with our technology. Yeah, we had raised millions of dollars from the National Science Foundation to build that technology, but ultimately it was primarily of interest to academics. And in the process of shifting that technology from things that interested us to things that actually solved some corporate or government problem, I think that was the fundamental orientation. The second problem, and this is what students particularly have, is that they are interested in jobs, titles, salaries. Really what they should be interested in, building on my previous point, is solving somebody's problem. And if you have that orientation, if you're constantly adding value by solving somebody's problem, you will always be in demand and you will always keep on rising. There are broadly two kinds of problems. One is what we are very good at teaching our students about. Those are technical problems. And by the way, those are designed to get you your foot into the door. I've been a good student. I've solved lots of technical problems. I can tell you the fundamentals of the capital asset pricing model, or this model and that model. That gets me in the door. That gives me a good GPA. That gets his attention. That gets me in the door. But ultimately, the more I progress within an organization, the more I need to solve not technical problems, but what Ronald Heifetz has called adaptive problems, right? That is, problems which fundamentally have to do with how people work with each other and how people see the world. And in fact, at the highest levels, when you're running an organization or a country or a university for that matter, almost 90% of your time goes into solving not technical problems. They would have been solved at lower levels, right? If it has a technical solution, some technical person that you have 2-3 layers below in the organization would have come up with a good solution. The reason why that problem is on your desk is because it is fundamentally a human problem that requires getting people around a table, understanding what are the different points of view, and then collaboratively getting a solution that people buy into and that they want to implement. That is the crux. I don't think we do anything approaching a good job in teaching these skills.
Shailendra, just to continue with you, I have a question. And since you focused on the academy area, I go back to what Darlene said about her experience in the PhD students not getting employed after their research experience. Do you think, because management education, technical education, whatever we are talking, if we go to professional age schools, it's pretty expensive. Yes. It's a high cost education anywhere you go, whether it is a country like India or whether it is in the US. Now, when I have 100 students joining my school and they invest so much of money into that school, should we not ask that school to give a return on investment saying that I will make you employable and end of the program, because it's a professional program and you are getting employable after the program. I guarantee that you will get a job after that. Can we mandate like that?
Yeah, that is very much the compact that exists between the students and the institution. And unfortunately, it is a little overdone. In my view, the problem is not that, for example, our students are very, very focused, whether it's IIM Ahmedabad or MICA, or for that matter, any of the other institutions that are represented here, they're very focused on starting salaries. And the institution tracks it very well because that is what feeds back into the rankings, right? So, in fact, the problem is, I would say it's a little bit of an overemphasis on salaries and not on do you justify that salary. In fact, I joke, I must share this joke with you. People say that I'm overworked and underpaid. Well, by the way, that is the best job security that you can have. If you're overpaid and underworked, you're not going to be around very long. So the question is not what is your starting salary, but can I justify it? And can I justify it over a 30-year period? Whereas, so I think that is the perspective that we don't have. We are always saying, what is in it for me? What you have to ask yourself is, what is in it for the other person? What is in it for Titan? Why the heck should Titan give me XYZ starting salary? What do I have to do to justify it? And so let me just end with a quote. Since we're in Gujarat, I have to quote Narsi Mehta. He says, Vaishnav jan to tene kahiye, peed parai jane re, right? That is, a man of God is one who understands the pain of the other. I would argue a good corporate person is also somebody who understands the pain of the other. And that is where you add value.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Darlene, taking on the student part, again, I'll ask you a question here. See, in the industry, typically we see that the top performing students who are the cream of the class and academically they are performing very well, Not necessarily when we do some talent management 9-box kind of a thing that we keep doing in the industry. Then not always they fit into the north corner for us, So a top performer in academics is not always a top performer in the industry. Do you agree with that? And if you agree, what would be the real chemistry in that?
So there is some concern, I think, and it gets back to these issues of competencies. It's actually been mentioned here in a number of forms, that the person is creative, that they view that there's a problem to be solved and they're willing to undertake that kind of solution. So I would say that as I posed it to my colleagues, one person said, this is a big question with a complex answer. So, part of the complex answer is that the needs of industry keep changing, and academia, education system needs to stay in touch with what are those changing needs. And industry's not going to come knocking at the university's door and say, oh, here are our needs today. Oh, here they are again tomorrow. So it seems to me if the universities are concerned, specifically for their graduates, then the universities need to be seeking that information from industry. What is it that you in the industry need? How can we help to serve you in some way, shape, or form? That being said, I don't know that we want to necessarily gear our graduates to the needs of industry today, because the needs of industry today are not going to necessarily be the needs of industry at the time the students walk out the door. So it's a conundrum, right? And how do you then make a decision as a faculty member, I think there's a couple things we need to think about. You know, going to the literature. Again, I mentioned some of John Raven's work, but also things that come out of Richard Boyatzie's work at Case Western Reserve. The notion that there's not only analytic intelligence that's needed, so we'll talk about the technical side, but there's the creative intelligence that's needed, the practical intelligence that's needed. So I think we as academics need to be thinking about, well, how do we inculcate some of those aspects into our curriculum? How do we do that? Well, I would say that part of it involves our pedagogy. That the standard stand up and lecture and walk out the door, hand people a written exam and ask them to respond, does not necessarily cut it. You need to be, what do people do in industry today? Well, people tend to work in groups. So what do they need to be doing in the classroom? They need to be working in groups. And they need to be solving problems in groups, figuring out the human interaction. I am not a fan of written exams. I just don't think they cut it. And so, well, how do we determine people's skills in this topic area? Well, maybe there are some practical things that they can do, or some simulations of the kinds of work that needs to be done. Each of the topics, obviously, or areas need some kind of different approach. I also think, and what I was reflecting on was even in the engineering field. I was on a dissertation committee, and the student was looking at the teaching of lean technology. This is a few years ago, right? And compared basically experiential learnings of that approach versus somebody lecturing. And there were actually at the university 2 different approaches. And then how were these students able to understand the topic and actually apply it? And it was clear that the experiential learning was much more effective. So I think we need to, as academics, think about the pedagogy that inculcates the competencies that students are going to need in the workplace.
That's absolutely something that I was looking for. Thank you very much, and very good answer. Particularly when you talked about teach them working together. That makes a lot of difference to the corporates when we really get these students on board. So just a quick time check. We have a few minutes left. So what I will do is now I'll go to Rick and have a question, and then to Sangeeta, 5 minutes each if you can contain. Then we'll open it for question answers to the participants here. So my question to you, Rick, is, with your experience, you worked with the industry, you worked in research, and you are working in the school. Are there any models of partnerships that you have seen, observed, or created, which you would like to share with the audience here today?
Okay, in the interest of time, oh no, that's yesterday's. It's no good. It's not the one on the stick I asked you to do. Okay. It's headed panel. I think, first of all, one of the problems is that we've done such little evaluation and assessment into the products, if you like, of higher education, and particularly professional education, that as a result, we've very little understanding and insight into this whole question of the interface between academia and industry. And as a result of that, then I think there's very little theorizing and very little model building into this whole area. Panel discussion. Okay. So. No.
There's one for only panel there.
This one here. No. Oh, okay, this one, panel then. Sorry. Okay. It's not, maybe it's my mistake, so apologies. A traditional model is one where we've had, particularly for students doing dissertations, research-based projects and so forth, is that we've had two supervisors, an academic supervisor and an industrial-based supervisor. And okay, that can work quite well. But the problem is that those two people, the academic supervisor and the industrial supervisor, still occupy their worlds. We don't really get the integration. We get the perspectives that are prepared for the student that says, oh, well, from my point of view, I think you should move your dissertation this way. And the academic can say, oh, well, from my point of view, you should move your dissertation or your project this way. So the worlds don't really merge and integrate. What I'm trying to look for and construct is a model where we don't have those separate worlds, but we have them as one. And in terms of my work in human resource development, I'm kind of looking for something that's called the AHRD scholar practitioner. And I see the scholar practitioner as someone who, the scholar, if you like, or the scholar part of the scholar practitioner, is a scholar who is engaging with the problems and the issues of industry. The practitioner, as an HRD scholar practitioner, is a practitioner who is using scholarly practice to inform and help their work. So it's not a continuum from the scholar on the one hand to the practitioner on the other hand. It's someone who is integrating those two. Now, how do we create this HRD scholar practitioner? Well, I think that the students in the room are the apprentice scholar practitioners, particularly if they are engaged in professional education. Hopefully the professional education curriculum has sufficient inputs and insights into it to give it the kind of insight into the professional world. But critically, they are apprentice scholar practitioners because they're learning about problem solving, we've heard that, critical reflective practice. They are, after all, undertaking a program of initial professional development. They're becoming the critical reflective practitioners that hopefully they will mature into in their business. And so we're trying to prepare them through academia to be professional practitioners. But what happens when they finish and they complete? They go back into the world of work and they lose, I think, or they lose the incentive to continue in this scholarly practitioner kind of way of working. And I think there's a key role for the professional bodies in terms of continual professional development to make sure, to insist perhaps that as a requirement of CPD, continuous professional development, there's a requirement to continue with that scholarly practice, so that it almost becomes a credential that you must continue to be able to demonstrate that you are engaging in that kind of practice as part of your full-time work. So we are developing, or this is the model, I suppose, that the university creates the initial professional development, works on the initial professional development, makes or develops an apprentice scholar practitioner. The world of work then continues that. We don't lose it. It continues through CPD, through continuous professional development. And maybe in that way, we don't have the scholar at one end, the practitioner at the other end. They're one and the same, in the middle somewhere in that continuum. Sorry, it would have helped if I'd had the slide, but my apologies for that.
Thank you, Rick. Really appreciate it. May I request the panel to kindly come again? Sorry? Can we do one and after that I give it to you? 1:15. We have time. So there's one more question I want to ask, then I'll open it and give it to you.
It's okay. He promised us an interactive session here. So could I just throw out some ideas?
Darlene, he's requesting for a comment, so let me do that, then I'll turn it to you. Okay?
It'll be very quick. I'm actually kind of shocked that no one on the panel has said that government requirements, accreditation standards, university systems are all so bureaucratic and slow-moving that academia cannot respond quickly the way industry can. So industry is always going to be ahead of us unless we get rid of all those bureaucratic systems. I'd like your reaction.
In fact, I was the last one to comment on the thing, and I was waiting. I just wanted to say a part of it where I was about to say that when government can impose CSR activities, 2% of it to the organization, as was said that the industry people should come back and teach. I was just saying that this can be very quick, and it can be a mandate on the industry personnel to come to the universities, and it can be necessarily some part of their job time can go to the organizations, that is the academia, and teach there as a contribution. So I think that can be a very good idea. Yeah, vice versa also. Of course.
The teachers should be allowed to go for consulting and, universities do not allow that very much.
Okay. I think, Rajeshwari, if you remember, that was the first comment when I was making and said about the interface. So that task was done. I am just talking about the second one. And even I said about the curriculum redesigning, we take the permission to redesign the course, it takes time, and by the time it said yes, the industry has already changed, that this is what. So I just said about a gap, but maybe not in a very concrete way as you commented. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you for raising that, and thanks, Sangeeta. So, Darlene?
So I was just simply wanting to suggest a couple kinds of very practical things that could be done. I mean, and that I've seen done. For example, simply switching people from, so an example would be my husband was a government lawyer. He switched positions with a professor at the university and taught law for a year and the university professor had to handle the cases that had come to hit, this government agency. Why couldn't that be done in various other fields where people actually switch and really feel what it's like to be in industry if you're an academic, or vice versa? So that's one very simple thing. For students, for example, the GK-12 program that was supported by the National Science Foundation, doctoral students in engineering were sent into kindergarten to 12th grade classrooms to work with teachers and develop curriculum, present in these classrooms. Well, guess what? These doc students, their eyes were opened as to what do these teachers face, how do I deal with these students, how do I communicate. These students were so much better prepared than their colleagues. I was looking at an evaluation project here. Better prepared to move into industries. Some of them wanted to do that. Others wanted to go into academia. They had that practical experience. Internships, obviously, are a way to foster that. So those are a few ways that are very practical. I would say in the US, our community colleges, more than our universities. So community colleges are two-year institutions. They are both preparatory for moving into the university, but they also have university partnerships. They're very good at partnering with universities and providing the kind of training that's needed for people to move into industry, move into private sector. So we ought to be looking at some of those programs.
Thank you, Darlene. So I'm opening up for the questions now. Just hold on. I'm not going to ask any questions further, okay? So it's your opportunity. But I think the points that we are seeing, and the very good trend that is emerging is there is a lot of positivity that I hear from all the panelists. None of them talked about anything pessimistic or something. We don't have a solution to this kind of thing. Rather, it's more like we have a solution and we can find the solution. We agree that academy and industry, these two are different animals, like what Raj said in terms of the hard wiring that has happened, or the chemistry that has, or the motivations that both of them have are different, but they are maybe the two parts of the same coin, and that's where that demand supply thing has to come in. That's one aspect that came out very clearly. And can we really bridge this gap, and Nayanbhai very categorically and very, very profusely said this, that be that bridge yourself. I am the bridge. And if we really think like that, if you have any kind of a role as a stakeholder to play in this game, and you say that I am the bridge, probably we will have a much stronger bridge than we can even just discuss or talk about it, And most important thing is for both industry and academia to come together, and I'll refer to what Shailendra said in Vaishnav Janato, being empathetic and understanding that we are working for the same cause, I am producing a talent in this school for the industry, and industry is looking for same talent, and that's why I'm looking at the institution. We understand that, but we are not empathetic to that. So thanks for bringing that point here, And the point that Darlene made, and I can tell you from my experience in the industry, the biggest challenge that we see with the professionals, particularly competent professionals, is making them work together, collaborate, and partner with each other, share, and create something as a team output. That's something that everybody in the industry struggles. Individually, we are all stars, but we want to work like islands. We don't want to be part of the mainland. We don't want to share the success there. If we can teach our students in their schools this kind of behaviors, probably it will make a big difference to when they come to the institution, to the industry there, So with that now, the floor is open. I can see a lot of hands going up, and I have from one corner of my eye, I can see Rajeshwari telling me, you have only 10 minutes to go, so we'll pick up only 2 or 3 questions from here. So we'll start with you. Please name the panelist who you want the answer to be given.
I would also request, please cut short your comments, rather just ask the next question.
Yeah.
Don't give the background of that. Please don't do. I request.
Sir, sorry, 10 minutes. I don't think we can, but I have a very quick point to, I have a quick point to give an example of why the bridge is not happening, and a quick point to give an example of what I have done to be the bridge. If you allow me, I will share. See, one is, Dr. Giri, you raised a very good question. See, we had the government initiating a national education policy, and academicians were called to give suggestions what we can do. So not just the government making structures for us to follow. And I'm giving an example. I was a part of that expert committee, and I said, let the industrialists join academics, make provisions of helping them join academics as a regular member. And then, because we have academicians who have never been to industry into senior positions, and this, no, first let the government take care of us as academicians. We won't let the industrialists come and take a 1 hour session and go back. Because when the industrialists actually go and take a class, it gives so much of value addition in the classroom, and the students start liking them. Yes, so that is one reason why. And one quick example. Sir, as a researcher, we have a lot of responsibility. We can become a bridge. We don't have people who encourage us to follow our own passion. They ask us to do what they are doing. But I have actually, and then we want money. So many academicians want money, only that research they take. But I have actually conducted research on the diamond industry of Gujarat, unorganized sector, 95% of global market share, which no academician took up because they don't value education. That is why the bridge is there, because they make a lot of money without without going to schools. They are uneducated people. But that research, how they do such globally successful business, has been accepted and published internationally, cited by Business World and all. So these are ways we can help bridge the gap, sir.
Thank you so much. So I can see a hand there. Yes, yours.
About that what our department we are missing into. So my request to you, Rajeshwari, is when you are sending this to the HRD ministry, do mention UGC also into it, and so that they because I am governed by UGC also into it, and please so that it yeah.
Why do we need to look at the larger manufacturing industry to give you the practical ground? Why can't you go to the sabji walas? Why can't you go to the small vendors? Why can't you go to learn practical aspects of business to the small and medium and tiny industries? We are always fancified with large manufacturing sector, and that is where we as academicians falter. And I really want to make this comment very strongly that we should go to the even smallest of the businessmen to understand the nitty-gritties and bring it back to the academy.
Thank you. Can you give the mic to the gentleman there? Yeah.
What I would like to refer to, Nayan, by what you said. As an HR practitioner, I have been fortunate to work with the companies where as a part of CSR, first as an HR practitioner, we started with our own self, dedicating 2 to 3 hours a month to academic institute. And that I do personally, and then we influence our leadership from my technical team, from my commercial team, from my sales team. Everyone goes to the academic institute at least 2 to 3 hours a month. And that has been credited, because at the end of the day, what gets measured gets, rewarded. So it is considered as one of the important leadership element, and this is a practical example. I work with the companies in Ahmedabad. Now I work with the company in Baroda. So, and it really helps. It really helps, and it, the leadership understands the importance of it, because as an HR, when we say, we should collaborate and all that, they don't understand, they're not able to relate. But when I put my business head into a class, and then when he starts, sharing his stories, I think the kind of response he gets and the academic gives that model. So I think this is something which we have been doing. And the suggestion I want to give to Rajeshwari is, when we talk of CSR, don't restrict to that 3% of profit. Restrict to some percentage of time that the industry can donate to the academic world as a part of compulsion. See, money is not a problem nowadays. 3% is okay, it will come.
We will term it personal, social responsibility. PSR.
Time, yes, something needs to be given. Thank you.
Hema has got some question there.
Yeah, Hema.
Hema has got some question there. See, I have to
Thank you.
manage the time.
I think I might become the most unpopular person here after I make this comment. I'm a HR practitioner as well as on board with a management school. And therefore, I'm also have the opportunity to select faculty, when they are taken into the organization. And there's a very basic question. How many of us here in this room are truly passionate about teaching? Right? Because that converts into the true potential of the individuals who come out of these institutions. And those individuals become the most productive, most talented, most performing individuals in the organization. And the truth of the thing is, I really don't find that number of people who are truly passionate about the profession of teaching and who come into teaching. And I think that kind of boils down to some of the basic problems that we have in the industry. That's a
Very well
just a
said,
comment.
Emma. So I can see a lot of hands going up and excitement there, but need to stick to the time. Yeah, so the panel is available here. We can talk to us during the lunch time, and I would request the panelists to kindly attend if anybody wants to approach and talk individually to you. So on my behalf, thank you very much. Been a great panel here, absolutely.
Please respect the panel. Don't just scatter for the lunch away. Just a second. Can I request the Here is for you. Yeah. Sir, एक quick photo हो जाए. Sir, आइए. नहीं, आइए. अरे sir, आइए. We will have a photograph together, please.